Sugar and Spikes is a science-backed and semi-sarcastic mental health podcast for a new type of business leader. Mental health concerns are occasionally addressed, but this podcast is not intended to diagnose or treat any condition, mental, physical, metaphysical, or otherwise. That's a job for your doctor or therapist, not a podcast. Now that we've got that out of the way, let's get on with the show.
Welcome to a brand new, semi-unexpected Sugar and Spikes. But, I mean, I don't know, like, we're kind of coming back from hiatus. I don't know what this means for Sugar and Spikes. Really quick, just for intros, for people that may not know us, that may be at home with some extra time and are like, what's this podcast? I'm Dez. I'm a serial content creator that lives and breathes small business and startup life. And my wonderful co-host is
I'm Tammy. First, faithful friend. Second, I also happen to be a licensed psychologist. So I live in mental health, and I like to be able to bridge mental health more into the business community. I don't know that it's always considered quite as heavily as it needs to be.
Yeah, Tammy, when Tammy says faithful friend, Tammy is that faithful friend when I'm like, let's start a company and a brand. She's like, okay. And so we did. And then 3 years later, we have this. But in terms of episodes and everything, so I think as podcasters, we do need to acknowledge this is coming after a bit of a break, a bit of an unexpected break, and a bit of something that we didn't acknowledge. We had every intention of acknowledging. We recorded an episode to say, hey, we're going on a hiatus.
And that was so much on a hiatus, we didn't post it.
That didn't happen. Like, things were so busy. And I think now, as much as any other time, that actually serves as a decent example of things don't go the way you think they're going to go. They don't go according to plan C, you know?
Yes. Or follow no plan at all.
Exactly. And then what do you do with it? Like, old school me from a couple of years ago would have said, well, we stopped releasing episodes. We didn't say we were taking a break. I can't look at that again. It was too much of a dumpster fire. I'm done. I need to start from scratch. And that's not the case.
Yeah.
You know, like, we can come up, and I think if you can own a situation, if you can acknowledge something, that gives you an area to connect with other people. Because I think everybody listening has been in a situation where it's like, that wasn't right. And you just throw your hands up.
Yeah,
like,
you're just like, why? Why did I do that?
And then you have this like element of universal connection. So this episode kind of serves as an example of, even if things don't go the way, like I said, like plan C or D would have gone, then you can still pick up the pieces, which also ties into the era that we are recording this in, which is COVID, coronavirus, quarantine, all of the buzzwords. Social distancing. Tammy and I, this is like the second episode where Tammy and I have recorded remotely from each other out of how many?
But I think that's interesting because the one and only other time we did it, you were actually not in the state.
Exactly.
We're literally in the same town. We live 10, 15 minutes away from each other, and here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So today we wanted to, when Tammy and I talked about kind of coming back, for one, when we did record the hiatus episode, we said May or June. This is before May and June. We're recording this at the end of March. It'll be released at the end of March.
Yep.
Clearly before May or June. But this stems from this idea of, we need to put this message out there because there are so many communications, so many messages out there saying, make the most of this time, take advantage of what you have, blah, 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 blah. And I think for entrepreneurs, for side hustlers, for anyone who before this hit felt like they were kind of maxed out, we already don't have space to make the most of this time because
what does that even mean? Like, what does that make the most of this time? Like,
well, I mean, have you seen how many like course sites are like, hey, here's 60 days free? Do you know how much Duolingo has pinged my phone to pick up learning Polish again? Like, I have not touched that app in months. And all of a sudden, that damn little bird is like, hey, it's time for your 5-minute Polish lesson.
But don't you think that also kind of gives this false perception that like everybody's just sitting around like with nothing to do, staring at a wall? Because I don't think that's the case.
Well, I think that there are very different experiences. And I think when you look at social media, I think when you go online, you see very different experiences. And I think for, like I was saying, like entrepreneurs, side hustlers, people who work on non-traditional teams, we are seeing people with traditional jobs that are either not working, so stressed out, people that like not working with pay, so really stressed out, people that are working with pay but not sure how long that's going to continue, and people that are in more of a solidified area. And then there's the rest of us who are like, if we don't pivot, if we don't do it, if we don't answer the call that has come up, and we're not even sure what that call is, but if we don't respond, we don't put food on the table, we don't keep a roof over our heads, so we're seeing people that are like, I'm so bored, I've watched all of the Netflix that I ever want to watch. And also this other group that is exceedingly stressed and just kind of like losing it for lack of eloquency.
Right. So like, how are we dealing with this? Right.
Exactly.
I think sometimes it can be easy to oversimplify times like this. Like, oh, well, you're still talking to each other. You're just doing it online. And I'm like, but that maybe isn't really recognizing things as they are. Right. Because you were talking about like your social interactions was happening on the weekends. And part of my coping and the way that I kind of get away from all the demands is coming over to your place. And so that has kind of gone away. And so I'm in a high stress situation and I'm working from home and my kids are home. So like having to navigate that really isn't about like living my best life. It's about how am I going to cope when the things I was using to cope are no longer available to me.
Well, and I think that also draws a really clear picture of we cannot judge or compare someone else's situation. Like we've said before, stress is still stress, problems are still problems, your pain, like even though it seems negligible or something to someone else, like pain is still pain, stress is still stress. And it's really easy to fall into the grass is greener type of scenario, because I think like, just hear me out.
No, it's fine.
Hear me out. And using like personal examples and everything, like for me, I fall on the small business side. I fall on my job is very much dependent on the economy, things like that. I'm very nervous, but I'm also home without kids. I have my family, I have my dogs, I have my health. No one in my family is sick. Someone from the outside would say, you're doing fine. Like I also have savings. Like I know objectively I am in a better situation than other people. People would look at my situation and say, what are you worried about? And hold on, let me finish.
Okay.
And like, if we look at different pivots in different ways of just where everyone else is, like I look at you and I say, you're in a health field, your job is secure, what are you stressed about? And you have all of these stressors. Like, I think that's what I'm getting to is like, we need to have empathy, not just for ourselves, but for other people. And now is not the time to say, well, you think you have it so bad. Look at me.
Well, yeah, it's not like,
like,
sorry.
I don't know, like, I'm kind of fumbling at this point, but now is not the time to compare. I think now is the time to say we all are in the situation that no one has experienced. And now more than ever, all of our feelings are valid. And no one needs someone coming to them. Sorry. No one needs someone coming to them being like, but you're fine.
Right. So, like, I think a lot of times that saying, oh, look how good they have it is just a way of like taking away somebody's validity of their experience, right? Like, oh, you don't have it so bad because of this, or you don't have it so bad because of that. There are certain amounts of privilege, but yet that doesn't mean that my stress isn't my stress. My anxieties aren't my anxieties, right? Like, yes, I'm in a health field, blah, 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 but I'm also the sole provider for a family of 6 people. So, like, that's a lot that's a lot of pressure.
What's really funny, and maybe it's not funny, but I was talking with my partner about it, and I was like, and her job is secure. Like, I was having a breakdown earlier, and my partner was like, but think of the mouth she has to feed. Think about the people under that roof. My partner was like, I would rather be in our situation than hers any day of the week.
So true. And I didn't even include my dogs. We're like 10 of us here. There's 10 people. Well, not people, but 10 beings.
Yeah.
Right?
Entities.
Like, and so it is quite a bit of stress. So, I mean, I get that. You know, I think that was really insightful. Oh, you didn't want my life. Imagine that.
And I mean, all of this is to say, we felt like coming on, regrouping, even during this unexpected time when we both wanted some space. We felt like it was important to get together because I think both of us have seen this, like, this dichotomy and this polarization, which is something we as a podcast kind of fight against. Of, hey, go learn all the languages, live your best life, do 10 face masks a day, and that stuff. And we see people that are bored out of their minds, and then people that, like, you know, are absolutely freaking out, which, not that there's not a place for that, but we wanted to come and say, yes, and here's some sort of guidance to navigate it. Not that we've gone through this before, but because I think one of the core things to understand is no one has gone through this before, which everybody needs to get. Like, no one giving any sort of guidance has lived through this situation.
True.
You know, like, we need to acknowledge that we are all trailblazers and figuring out things the best we can. Which also just goes to support our longstanding theory of people that say, oh, I've done this. Like, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter if you've done something before or not. Like, you need the foundational skills. You need those flexible skills beyond, well, here is step A, B, and C for how I made 6 figures. A one-off plan isn't going to see you through these unprecedented times.
Right.
But flexible skills will.
Right. Yeah, because, like, you're right. We haven't lived through this. And I think the complete impact and I'm not even talking on like a national level, but the way this is impacting our lives, I don't think has really kind of hit us yet. I don't think that we really have a good idea. Like, even saying, oh, Tammy, like, your job is safe. Like, that may or may not be true. We don't know.
Right.
Like, we're making a certain number of assumptions, right? And with that, and the ambiguity of the entire situation, then we end up with higher levels of anxiety, which some anxiety like motivates, but if you get to the point where it's crippling, then it's actually not working in your favor. So you want to keep some anxiety for sure, but too much. And I think that is what, and I think because, like I was saying, like, I like to come over to your place and we kind of unwind and chat and blah, blah, blah. So I don't think that there's really a good idea of not being able to engage in some activities that you were engaging in before, and how much those things really meant to you in terms of your stability, in terms of your stress, in terms of your emotional and physical health and mental health. We just don't know.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to this idea of, especially for like founders and people in kind of non-traditional environments, but even people that are now working from home. Like, I think of jobs who have transitioned into this work from home situation unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Like, there is a level of privilege, and I think it would be a disservice to everyone if you don't acknowledge the level of privilege in being able to work from home. There's a level of privilege in even minor flexibility in your schedule and being able to navigate emotions. Like, I think, for example, I have referenced it before, like, I totally lost it earlier today. It's a Tuesday. It's the middle of the day on a Tuesday, and I lost it and had like a full-on panic attack. And that doesn't necessarily have to affect my work or my productivity today, because I can continue on afterwards. I can do my work. I can pick up from that. And quote unquote, no one needs to know, except it's on a podcast, so everybody's going to know.
Now everyone knows.
But I think like there's this privilege in being able to ride the waves. And as founders, as people, I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast, people that are drawn into our world, are very much type A and like, I go forward. I don't stop. I go forward. I think allowing yourself to ride the waves is going to be key, because nothing good happens by suppressing emotions.
No, it doesn't, because then you're not, for many reasons, but like, you can't see the situation how it really is. You're basically pretending that it's another way, because there can be, I think, a lot of, it can feel threatening to say like, this is how things are. And what am I going to do? Because the truth is, we don't really know. So like, it's a lot of short-term, kind of more immediate planning right now, with ride the wave being the more long-term strategy, right? So the short-term strategy is I'm going to do XYZ, but in the long term, since I don't know what's coming, I'm just going to go with it. But there is still a certain amount of like ambiguity in that. And it's really anxiety provoking, actually, you know?
But that brings me to another piece in terms of, we're living in these unprecedented times. Like we said earlier, like no one's navigated being on lockdown, being in quarantine, and watching the economy go however it's going to go. No one's done this before. So I think we also need to acknowledge the fact that our coping skills, in order to reach a minimal level of productivity, are going to be unlike things we've necessarily seen before. And I don't think that now is the time to judge. Like, I've seen people that are like, well, after quarantine, I'm coming out weighing 20 pounds less and in the fittest shape I've ever been, and blah, blah, blah. Like, now is not the time for that. Now is the time
but maybe that's, I don't know. Go ahead.
I think it depends on how it's framed up, right?
Yeah,
like,
agreed.
If you find strength in that. And also, there's a part of me that's like, I wonder how much of that is eating disorder based, because you're looking for control in that sense. I'm not here to judge. This is my point, right?
Yeah.
Like, even if we see that, it is not, we need to give ourselves permission to say, and that is me right now, and I know I can come back from that, and that's not me right now. Here's what I'm doing, you know? Like, I think on the podcast I've talked about how like I've been aware of my drinking patterns. Like, I don't think I would say I've been one that has struggled with drinkings, but I've been aware of like the ebbs and flows and things like that. And I've been aware of like, I don't want to create a physical dependency. things
Mhm.
like that.
Yeah.
And I've reached a point where I'm like, now's kind of not the time to be as quote unquote on the ball. You
Mhm.
know, there was a framework, like Friday, Saturday, happy hour drinking, cool. If like a this is gonna make me sound so alcoholic, but
It's
like
okay. Lay it out there.
if some champagne is going to help calm my nerves versus Xanax, like I'll have a sip of champagne because there's some evidence that says like alcohol is less addicting than Xanax. You know, I like we all know what we need. If we are grown adults that have made it this far in life, we know our in case of emergency break glass coping skills. We know our high functioning coping skills. We know our mid level coping skills. We know these things. Now is not the time to put judgment around those things because everything is so uncertain. It's hour by hour. We may feel like, yeah, I'm going to live my best life and then see a news report. And then it's like, oh my God, I'm going to be in the bed, like in a fetal position, crying for the next couple of hours.
But I mean, it's not best life ever. It's best life possible right now, right?
Mm-mm.
And so I think the mistakes come when you're like, best life ever. And I'm like, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like, and also there was something I was gonna say. What was I gonna say? Oh, so those like in case of emergency break glass, maybe you're having a drink, maybe you're eating cake, maybe you're doing this thing over here. They tend to be more like distractional type skills.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those are really great in the short term,
Mm-hmm.
but tend to become more problematic over time.
Right.
So use your immediate short term skills now,
Mm-hmm.
and at the same time, lay a foundation for things to be more long term.
Right. What is sustainable?
Yes, exactly.
Mhm. Which is a really good point considering we don't know how long the stuff is going to last. Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy to me the differences in even just states where, like, some schools are going back, some schools are quote unquote going back next week, and then some schools end of May. You know, like, no one can really say it. No one knows what announcements are coming down the pipeline. And like we do need to have this balance of what is getting me through today and planning for what is getting me through this year.
Yeah. And to be like, you know what? I'm not sure, but here are the
Mhm.
ways that I'm going to stay flexible. Here are the ways that I'm going to stay sustainable or whatever, right?
Mhm.
Because I can tell you when they first shut down the schools, at least here
Mhm.
in my district, it was like, oh, it's going to be for a few weeks. And a week later, they were like, nope, it's going to be until May. And then
Mhm.
they're even talking about not even coming back and just starting again in the fall. So it didn't, it, it's like ever changing, right? So that's when our skills for emotional regulation and our skills for distress tolerance become the most important.
Mhm. I also think it's interesting navigating this idea of mindfulness and being in the moment
Mhm.
and acknowledging there will be a big picture tomorrow because I can tell you I have definitely fallen into the trap of this is life for now and forever, and
Yeah.
then occasionally like the fact hits me where it's like, no, at the worst it'll be 6 months. Things will pick up again. Like that's been really hard for me to keep in my not focus, but just on my radar.
Yeah.
This idea of this isn't permanent, which is where so many rash decisions get made,
Mhm.
so many, you know, unfortunate choices can be made.
Well, it kind of prompts us to act without really thinking through the consequences, because we do know it's not forever, but we don't actually know coming out the other side or coming over the curve or whatever you want to call it. We don't really know what that future looks like. So it's a little bit unpredictable.
Yeah.
And so what does that do? It like just makes everybody kind of freak out, right? Because like we knew how things were. Now they're not that. It kind of blew up in our faces. So how are we navigating that? So, I mean, yes, short-term distraction with long-term ways to cope with what's coming, with the understanding that we don't really know, right?
Yeah.
So like we're living in this gray space all the time, and that is hard.
Well, I think like, so I've talked before on the podcast about how I'm kind of a fan of journaling, and I can own I haven't been doing it lately, but something I've been playing with in my mind, and that's kind of like an upcoming goal is getting back to it, but also challenging myself when I've been thinking about it. Like, what choices am I making that will get me through today and help me complete what needs to be done today? And will the me from 6 months from now be okay with that? You know, like really keeping myself in check of how is that balance? How is that dance going? And even if it's like because she'll be cool that I'm still alive, like, then cool. Like, I can move forward with that. Like, yeah, me from 6 months will be down with the fact that I'm like a size 16, but alive. Like, okay, informed consent for my own life choices, right?
It's a thing.
So I think that that's kind of one check or balance that may be helpful, not to add added pressure, but just to help us remember it's not going to be this way forever. Because the media, social media, so many messages we're getting right now, there's no end in sight. And
there may not be right now.
We need to remind ourselves that there will be, like, even if we look at pandemics throughout history, it's a couple years at most. Like, life will out. We'll get through this. Even in the most extreme cases, life will out.
I feel like we're living through the purge, like nature edition.
Oh, I was talking with my partner last night and I was like, no, with all the lockdowns, it's not the purge, it's the reverse purge. It's the consumption with everybody buying everything. And then, of course, my partner, not one to miss a beat, he's like, no, it's the binge. We're in the binge.
Oh my goodness.
And those are the jokes.
We have to laugh at that, right? Like,
exactly.
Yes.
So,
I mean, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think like the takeaways for people that are in more of a non-traditional role that feel added pressure, that just have no idea what's going on, which is 95% of society right now.
Yes.
I would say ride the waves, because shutting down your emotions, it's not going to lead to productivity. Like, I lost it earlier, and I got through 30 or 40 minutes of that and then felt okay to go back to work and was actually focused, because I understood, like, my brain navigated if we don't get our crap together, then X, Y, and Z. So
yes,
your endorphins are regulating. Go forth and do what needs to be done.
Take effective action.
Exactly. Like, we need to give ourselves space to hit that stride, because we can hit that stride right now. Technology has allowed us to. Like, we don't have to shut down. We don't have to, like, fold in on ourselves. We need to be able to bend and not break.
Yes. So, like, you have to spend some time with those emotions. Like, that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, spending some time with the me that's freaking out. Spend some time with the me that's super anxious. Spend some time with whatever your emotions are right now. Go ahead. Like, we always feel, not always, but very often we get stuck in, like, we have to act now, now. But, like, if you were to take 15 minutes we feel like we can't, but then we actually do. And then we're like,
Yeah.
okay, this is better. So spend some time with the emotions and building that awareness of what you're feeling without having to act on it. So maybe you start with that, you act on, then you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'm feeling what I'm feeling right now and I don't have to act on it. Or you could if you choose, right? And so this is where you start to go from like the short term to the long term, right? So you are spending time in that short term, having a drink, eating, like exercise, whatever, binging Netflix. But then as you start to build awareness of what's going on, then you can figure out how to effectively deal with all of these things that are hitting you, bombarding you. So that's when you're starting to build in that long-term coping.
Well, I think like as entrepreneurs and things where we do work in operations that are very much like you have this thought and then you go, and there's not a lot of like corporate holdup. It's hard to give ourselves that space because we're used to working at lightning speed.
Yeah.
But the one thing I would say is there's maybe a 3-digit number of people that don't have the privilege of giving themselves 30 minutes to make a to like take space and then make a decision.
Yeah.
You know, that's like surgeons, doctors. Well, I guess right now, like thousands of doctors. But I mean, I feel like my point is being made. Like, for the most part, we have privilege in taking 30 minutes, an hour, and then going forward. Nothing is as urgent as that, you know?
I think that's important. And also remember to do things that are enjoyable, to do things that are fun. If you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, do something that brings calm. Like for you, it's journaling. For me, it's kind of like getting out with one of my dogs for 10 minutes. For other people, it is what it is. So you can, because when we take opposite action, then we can actually bring about not the thing we're feeling, but the opposite of that. Which was a really eloquent way of saying that because I basically just said it like back then. Whatever. It's been a long week.
No, I like we need to lean into kind of the opposite. You know, like I mean, just in terms of work and stuff, the times when I've been most stressed, when I take my dogs out to play for a few minutes, which is the last thing I should be doing, that helps exponentially.
Right. So then you should be doing that because at a certain level, sitting there and trying to just do everything now has diminishing returns. Like you have to get a break. Even if you just walk away from your computer, go up your stairs and down your back stairs and up your stairs and down your back stairs for like 5 times.
Right.
You could do that, right? Because you're increasing your positive experiences. You're doing things that are enjoyable and fun. And that helps you get into a better headspace.
Yeah. I think the last thing I would say, because we have like 2 minutes to wrap up. The last thing I would say is take away the judgment. Like now is not the time for judgment. This is the underlying theme of this podcast. We are all doing the best we can. Right. Now more than ever, we are all literally doing the best we can. And if that's making it through the day by breathing, kudos to you. If that's making it through the day by checking your email and not responding, awesome. You have an idea of what awaits you when you can. You know, if it is signing on and kicking ass and learning a different language all in one day, awesome. What does that mean for tomorrow you? Will you be exhausted? What do you do with that?
Right.
Things like that.
Yes. And remember, you got to cope with your support system. So we are distanced. We are not disconnected.
Exactly.
So reach out because support systems are what help you cope. They're what help you see the things in your freak out you cannot see.
Which goes into what could be a really great next topic of communication and boundaries and asking for what you need and setting boundaries around things that you don't have space for. So maybe we'll talk about that next week.
Maybe.
Assuming we have the space for it.
Right.
So that's what we have right now. I hope everyone listening can understand that we were in a time of hiatus. We saw a need. We don't know what Sure and Spikes is going to look like for the next month or so because we weren't planning on coming back. And maybe things change as an audience of entrepreneurs and multifaceted folks. I hope you guys can understand that. So we will do our best to communicate our intentions and strategies with you. And what I can say right now is we will be back. So go ahead and subscribe so you know when that is. And that's the honest answer right now. All right. I have no
Take care, friends.
Yeah, I was gonna say I have no eloquent way of
finishing it up.
Saying peace out, y'all. But may the odds be ever in your favor. Bye.
Bye.